Hello, welcome to this online session. My name is Richard Johns and I'm from the Department of History of Art at the University of York, and I'm delighted to host this session this evening. We're delighted this evening to hear from Helena Cox, an art historian and inaugural curator of the University of York Art Collection. This evening, Helena will take us on a journey to discover some of the hidden treasures of the collection, a collection that is as old as the university itself. But if, until recently, you didn't know the University of York had a collection of its own, then you wouldn't be alone. It wasn't until last year, in 2022, that the university appointed Helena as the first curator with responsibility for the collection. Since then, she's been doing an amazing job making the collection visible, rediscovering parts of it that had been long forgotten, and crucially, making it accessible in new ways, not only to students and staff and visitors to the university, but to the world at large. So it's my great pleasure to hand over now to Helena to find out more about the collection. Helena, over to you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much, Richard, for such a lovely introduction. I'm so delighted to be here and to be introducing the hidden treasures from the University of York Art Collection. And I can see there's a lot of you who turned up tonight, so this is absolutely wonderful. So it is my great pleasure to introduce you today to a collection that, as Richard very wisely pointed out, has been hidden throughout the history of the university. So the university, as you know, was founded in 1963. The university itself, actually, and this is really important for the understanding of the history of the art collection. The university itself had the founding ideals which encompassed art very kind of poignantly from the start of the university's inception. I'm showing you now some of the photos of our wonderful campus. If you come from close or far, do make your way to enjoy our campus if you can, because it's not only full of art, but it's also an architectural splendor. And even if you might not be a straightforward fan of the kind of brutalist architecture, or it's not purely brutalist, but in the style of that the original campus consists of, it's still an absolutely wonderful and uplifting experience to actually see the campus and feel why the architecture actually plays an important role in perceiving art at the university. So one of the reasons that I always point out that art was from the start of the university's existence a really important factor is that many of the colleges, and now mainly Derwent College, had sculptures that were built into the corridors and the walls of the colleges. These founding ideals of the university also included accessibility and interconnection. So there wasn't much of a feeling of hierarchy. Everybody was welcome into all the premises around the university, and the idea was that you would, as you move throughout the campus, you would encounter artworks, and this begins with artworks built into the colleges, but then extends into a sculpture trail that we have on campus, and which I'm going to talk about very shortly. I'd like to suggest for you to maybe enjoy some more online resources after this talk, if it sparks your interest. One of these would be an architectural gazetteer of 20th century York architecture, which has recently been launched also in the collaboration with the art history department in York. And this is an amazing resource if you want to see the original splendor of the architecture of the campus, but also it includes quite a lot of artwork that originally existed at the university. And this photograph that I'm showing here is one of my absolute favorite photographs because it shows a very early view of Derwent College, and in front of it, a Henry Moore sculpture, a family group sculpture, which was on loan to the university for quite a long time. And this is a fantastic connection that the university had very early on to the Henry Moore Foundation and to Henry Moore himself. And unfortunately, this sculpture was then returned to the foundation. And I've heard allegedly that another one was borrowed and placed on campus, but that one was returned as well. So I have a cunning plan to make sure that we do have another Henry Moore sculpture on campus very soon. So follow me on that journey and keep your fingers crossed for me. I think a Henry Moore would look wonderful on our campus. Another resource that I would really recommend you to enjoy is our online art collection catalogue, which was compiled in 2015 by a selection of students and staff. This was well before I was appointed a curator, and I'm so grateful that the students and staff have actually worked on compiling this immensely useful and fantastic resource. This catalogue is completely online, so you can just dive in, you can search through kind of by material, by artist, by period, and the collection is basically completely documented on there, although completely in inverted commas, because actually the collection might be much bigger than we currently know, and I'll tell you a bit more about that in a minute. So do enjoy enjoying the online resources. And also, while we're at it, talking digital, we do have social media accounts on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. It's Art at York. If you are so inclined, if you do like social media, please follow us. The social media is run by myself, and I'm very, very keen to use the social media channels as something that enables me to share some of the hidden treasures from the collection with as wide a public as possible. So please do follow me on that journey. A bit about the art collection in a nutshell. The art collection consists of over 900 artworks across various media. So we're very strong in graphic artworks, lithographs, etchings, and also oil on canvas, acrylics on canvas, and watercolors. But we also do have sculptures, we have ceramics, we have drawings, we've got photography, and recently, actually, just 2 weeks ago, we have acquired a video art piece as well from our wonderful students at the Norman Ray Gallery. So we are expanding the collection as we speak. A very important factor in the history of the collection is the so-called Granada Art Foundation, which is a foundation that was established just as the university was being established as well. And this was a specific fund of money that was aimed at purchasing contemporary artworks into the collection. So this is another kind of fascinating detail that really shows that artwork was meant to be part of the art collection, part of the university's kind of personality and profile. And while the collection has then gone into a bit of a kind of hiding for a few decades, these ideals definitely were there, and I'm determined to bring it back into the limelight that it deserves. So Granada Art Fund, you might be familiar with the Granada Television, Manchester-based, and this is indeed what it was linked to. So for about 2 decades, in the late 60s, 70s, and beginning of the 80s, Granada Art Fund gave us an annual amount of money that was specifically made for the purchases of contemporary art, and some of the best artwork in the collection was indeed purchased through these funds. Unfortunately, then those funds were not renewed; they weren't used anymore, and that's when a slightly more tricky period came for the art collection because it wasn't professionally managed. There wasn't any budget for contemporary art purchases, so the collection continued to grow in a very organic manner. Now, on the one hand, you may say, well, this is a great shame that the professional kind of funds have not been renewed, that there wasn't money for purchases of contemporary art. But on the other hand, what is really fantastic is that despite these obstacles, the university actually kept evolving, and there's always been such great demand for art. So heads of individual colleges would create fundraising campaigns to buy artwork into the collection. I have been in touch over the 1.5 years that I was in post. I have been in touch with a lot of people who have been involved in early exhibitions around the campus in individual colleges. And very often artwork from these exhibitions would then be purchased into the collection. Or alternatively, there were agreements where contemporary artists, and especially regional artists and York-based artists, would show their works in the university, in various colleges. And as a thank you for showing their work, they would then donate 1 or 2 works from that exhibition to the colleges. So this is how artwork grew over the years. And although it wasn't professionally managed, I love the dynamism with which artwork has always been at the heart of the university. And this is really great to know, especially because the university doesn't actually have a fine art degree. So at some universities where, they train fine artists, it might be much easier to just get into the habit of acquiring artwork every year based on, student shows. And at York, obviously, we cannot do that because we don't have fine art. But nonetheless, we obviously have the art history department, which has always been incredibly influential in taking care of the collection way before I was appointed. But also it's wonderful to see that there was always this understanding that art is really crucial for the internal life of the university and the intellectual and creative dimension of life at a university campus, even despite the fact that we do not have a fine art degree. And the collection, thanks to all this development, ended up having quite prominent international as well as local artists included in the collection. And some of these names that I'm showing here on this slide, Barbara Hepworth, Sidney Nolan, Keith Vaughan, Austin Wright, John Langton, Sally Arnott, and many, many more. The image that I'm showing is Aubrey Williams's El Dorado, and I'll do like a mini study of Aubrey Williams in a minute, but I would direct your attention to the two sculptures that I'm showing. Austin Wright and his Dryad from 1984, located in front of Heslington Hall, is one of the most important sculptures in the collection because it links to the very inception of the university, because of the personality of Austin Wright. He was a close friend of Henry Moore, and in the early years of the university, he held two large exhibitions on campus where he populated the campus with his sculptures. And as a result of that, two of these sculptures have remained in the holdings of the collection. So we have one called the Avocado and one called a Dryad. I will actually switch to the next slide. And when I said that we have one that is called the Avocado, that was actually a bit kind of colloquial of me, because the true name of the sculpture is actually untitled. And when I was preparing for this job, when I studied the artworks at the university, I always respected the untitled as an abstract artwork. And then when I started working at the university, I noticed that everybody refers to the sculpture as the Avocado. And once you hear it's called the Avocado, you kind of cannot unhear it, because it really does have that very typical shape that really reminds me of an avocado. So I absolutely cannot unsee it now, and maybe I have inflicted this on yourselves as well. So this is one of the earliest sculptures on campus, and this slide is titled A Sculpture Trail, and this is because one of our kind of jewels in the crown of our art collection is a sculpture trail. This is really unique for York, because at the moment we are the only sculpture trail at York, and obviously there is the amazing Yorkshire Sculpture Park in Yorkshire, but for York and the kind of close local regions around York, this is a really unique asset that we have at the university. And while these sculptures have been again slightly hiding over the past decades, I'm really determined to bring them out and to make the public aware of the fact that these artworks are here, and that they are here for everyone to enjoy. Unlike the 2D artwork from the collection, which at the moment, unfortunately, we don't have a kind of museum standard display space. So we don't really have an art gallery at the moment, which, by the way, is something I very, very much hope to change in the future. But because we don't have that gallery space at the moment, we sometimes struggle to find spaces where we can show the highlights from our collection. While the sculpture trail is publicly accessible, you don't have a specific, you don't need a specific space for that. It is there all over campus, and it is open to the public 24/7 all year round. So this is an amazing asset, which I'm really hoping to, implant on the map of York. And my ambition is for people coming to York, thinking, well, we've been to the Minster, we've been to York Art Gallery, and we need to see the sculpture trail at the University of York as well. So that's the plan. We have 15 sculptures at the moment. Majority of them are located on Campus West. There's only one on Campus East, but we have some really exciting plans for a really large sculpture to hopefully come to Campus East, but I cannot tell you any more at the moment, because it's all happening behind the scenes. So keep an eye out on our social media, and you might find out more if we are successful in acquiring this artwork. But this desire to acquire new artwork really stems from our overall desire to make the sculpture park grow. So while the collection has not been managed for about 60 years. Now the plan is to manage it properly and to grow it as well. So to reflect contemporary society, to reflect life in York, in our region, but also in our country, and international trends in acquiring new artworks into the exhibition. And as you can see from these slides, our sculptures span quite a few decades. So the oldest sculptures we have come from the 60s with Austin Wright and his connection to Henry Moore, but there have been commissions of artwork throughout the years. Obviously, the absolute megastar among all our collection items is Barbara Hepworth's sculpture Antiphon from 1969. And if some of you have been interested in the art collection in previous years, you might have come across an image of the sculpture being set outdoors in a beautiful natural setting in front of the music department. At the moment, unfortunately, it is not outdoors anymore, but for very good reasons. And the reasons are that the sculpture has been slightly endangered by the changes of the weather, and the condition of the sculpture wasn't great. And luckily, 2 years ago, we were asked to loan this sculpture for the largest retrospective of Barbara Hepworth works ever, which was obviously fantastic. And in order to be able to loan the sculpture, we have had it professionally conserved by an expert on Barbara Hepworth work. And it was thanks to the recommendations from the expert that we decided that the sculpture actually needs to live indoors. And at the moment, you can find it in the music department. So although it's not outside in its natural setting, it still looks really amazing. And we're hoping to kind of highlight its presence in the music department in future years as well, so that people know that they can find it there. Moving on from the 60s, there have been a series of commissions of artwork throughout the years. We have Polly Ioannidis' Moon Dancer, a really wonderful kind of smallish sculpture, again located near the music department. This one was commissioned to commemorate a faculty member, which is a similar story to the tallest sculpture on campus, which is Gordon Young's Singing Stone from 2015. This sculpture is really impressive if you see it in real life. It's very, very tall. You need to, it also invites you to almost dance around the sculpture, because it has wonderful verses on it from Yeats' poem, The Cloths of Heaven. And in order to read it, you need to kind of dance around the sculpture and decipher the individual verses. So this work was commissioned only in 2014, 2015 by the music department to commemorate the chancellorship of Dame Janet Baker, who was a university chancellor and obviously very closely linked to the music department. And this was a collaboration between Dame Janet Baker, the university, the artist, and the music department. So again, a really wonderful example of not an accidental commission of an artwork, but a really thought through and planned project, which resulted in a really fascinating sculpture. If the photos of the sculptures intrigued your interest in our sculpture trail, we do run regular sculpture trails, sculpture trail tours, and these are open to the public. So do keep an eye out on our social media. There will be quite a few coming up over the summer month. So do come over, because it's a great pleasure to see all the sculptures and talk about them in a group. I mentioned that Barbara Hepworth's wonderful piece Antiphon has been loaned to the Hepworth in Wakefield for the retrospective, and I just absolutely love this photo of Antiphon when it was installed in the first room of the exhibition. If you haven't been, it was an absolutely fantastic show, and it brought together artworks from Yorkshire in the very first room of the exhibition. And as you walked in, you could see our Antiphon kind of very majestically standing in this wonderful space. And that really inspired me, and my ambition again is to make sure that we do have slightly better spaces and display spaces at the university, so we can show our sculptures and our artworks in this kind of more majestic way, because the way Antiphon spoke to visitors in the space of the Hepworth was really magnificent, and hopefully we can replicate that at the university in the future as well. And I mentioned that we do run sculpture tours, and this is a proof. So we are very keen for the art collection to be used both by students to be embedded into teaching and learning, but also to be available to the public. And over the last year and a half, been trying very hard to get local groups interested in the sculpture tour. And we had some wonderful local history groups visiting, and these majority of these photos are from a really lovely visit that we had from the Friends of York Art Gallery. And it was such a joy taking them around, and you can see some of the sculptures. They do look a bit different when you see the kind of size relation to the human human element. And the photo in the middle of the slide is a photo from last year's Art of Describing module of Art History Department. And obviously the Art History Department is our closest ally in the university. We work very closely with them, and their students have been really interested in working with artworks from the collection, which reminds me that this is a really unique opportunity, because with the art collection, because it's been unmanaged for so many years, this is actually a great advantage and something that gives both obviously us from the curatorial team, but also the students and academics at the university and the public, a really rare kind of peek behind the scenes of collections management. And very often you get to see art collections that have been wonderfully managed for decades, that are in perfect order, and it doesn't always allow you to see the amount of behind the scenes work that goes into managing art collections and curating shows. So here we actually have a really great opportunity to share with all our stakeholders this amazing journey of taking this assembly of artworks spread across 2 campuses and turning that into, hopefully in the future, accredited art collection, which is a great joy. I mentioned that art was embedded in the university's kind of spirit from the start, and here are some images of sculptures by Fred Millett. These are concrete reliefs which you can find in the Derwent College. Derwent College on Campus West is Grade 2 listed, which is great news for us in terms of the artwork. When you walk through Derwent College, and do join us for the sculpture tours if you have a chance, because we also include walking through Derwent College, and it's a true journey of discovery, because you walk in there and you never know where a panel of kind of abstract concrete composition will suddenly appear. So you walk through the corridors, and at one point you see this amazing kind of organic abstract panels which are lit from above, and the corridor is otherwise quite dark. So these kind of amazing shapes just jump at you. And then you walk a bit further and you get into this little courtyard where you've got views of the lake, but you can see the lake through gaps in another panel, which is much more kind of geometric. So no 2 panels are the same. And while many people say, well, concrete, is concrete really such a great sculpting material? And maybe these are kind of more utilitarian, merged with the architecture, but in actual fact, every single of our Fred Millett's reliefs, every single one of them is unique. There aren't 2 that are the same, and all of them are made in a slightly different way. So I have to confess, I knew very little about sculpting with concrete before I started working at the university, but I have actually totally fallen in love with it now. And we had a few experts coming over telling us, well, some of these reliefs, some of the features on these reliefs had to be made by hand. So some of them are made using various molds, but some of them would be sculpted by hand, which is something quite fascinating when you think of concrete. So again, seeing these panels is really amazing. And what makes me really happy is that when I take not only members of the public, but also academics and students and staff from the university around, and when I show them the panels, some of them say, oh my gosh, I've worked here for 20 years and I have never noticed these. I never knew these were actually artworks. So this is a great joy for me to be able to open people's eyes and show them some of the fascinating aspects of the collection. Moving on, away from sculptures, we also have an amazing kind of body of work that has been loaned to the university for a long term, within a kind of a long-term arrangement. So we were very lucky that one of our former vice chancellors at the university, Brian Cantor, who started his vice chancellorship in 2002. He was, although a scientist, an expert in materials manufacturing, he has great passion for modern and contemporary art, and he was kind enough to actually loan the university over 60 artworks, which are at the moment located across both of the campuses, so both across Campus West and Campus East. These are all works that kind of span roughly the periods that our art collection is stronger at, which are kind of 60s, 70s, 80s artworks, but they are incredibly varied. There's over 60 works, so really incredibly varied collection, including here Henri Matisse, and we also have a series of works by Russell Baker, which are just now being photographed actually by a wonderful university photographer, Paul Shields, who's documenting the entire art collection. This collection is incredibly fresh and varied, and it includes David Hockney's Ulswater. We actually have several variants of the sprint, which is fascinating in from the kind of technical point of view, studying these works, and a large collection of exhibition posters as well, often with signatures or inscriptions by the artists. So a really lovely and fresh-looking Gilbert and George poster from 2009. And why this is really important for us is not only because of the wonderful fact that we have this great body of work to show across our campus, but also it shows the importance of kind of creative personalities who come to the university, work at the university, understand the importance of art for the intellectual life of the university, and then decide to do something for the art collection. And this is a pattern that has been taking place throughout the years, and it makes me incredibly happy to see that even at a time where there wasn't a curator in place and when the collection maybe wasn't professionally managed, there was still this desire to really grow it. And we are incredibly lucky to have such a wonderful loan on our campuses. And I'm just waiting for students to come and start researching this collection because it's fantastic. And finally, I'd like to have a look at a few highlights from the collection. There would be quite a lot to talk about, but let's do a bit of a whistle-stop tour of some of the highlights. Sidney Nolan is an Australian artist, and we are incredibly lucky to have two of his artworks in our collection. For some time, Sidney Nolan was slightly under-researched, and perhaps there wasn't a deep enough understanding of how amazing these works actually are and how valuable they have become over time as well. Just in case you're wondering, the entirety of our art collection is valued for over £4 million, so it is a considerable asset. Now, this evaluation is a few years old, so actually I'm thinking probably it's going up as we speak. So obviously, for me as an art historian and a curator, the value of the artwork doesn't need to be pronounced in monetary terms, but even if you're thinking what the monetary terms tell us, I think they really reflect the massive importance and what an asset this is to the university. So Sidney Nolan's works in our collection, the way they got into our collection, again, is linked to a very similar scenario to Brian Cantor, a very important personality working at the university, feeling the importance of the collection and deciding to do something transformational with it. So these paintings were actually donated to the university by Lord Kenneth Clarke, who was a chancellor at the university between 1967 till 1978. And upon his retirement from the university in 1978, he decided to donate these two paintings to the university. Clarke was obviously a massively influential cultural figure, but he was also the person who motivated Sidney Nolan, who lived in Australia when he met Clarke for the first time, motivated him to actually move to London in the 1950s. So it was really symbolic, kind of bringing these two paintings and making them part of the university art collection was really symbolic of the role of the university in major artistic movements in the country and internationally. I did a completely separate talk specifically on Sidney Nolan when the artwork was loaned to an exhibition, The Art of Colour, at Tennent's Auctioneers last year. And when I spoke about these two paintings, I spoke about how fantastic it is that we have these specific two paintings in our collection, because they really link to themes that Sidney Nolan focused on most in his career. And one of them was, just go back here, one of them was the theme of a convict, of somebody on the run, and the other theme was a kind of love song to the complex and sometimes treacherous but also breathtaking central Australian landscape. So we are incredibly lucky to have these works, and actually I have heard, this was before my time, but I have heard that the gallery in Victoria have several times tried to persuade us to give our paintings away, because there is not very many Nolans outside of Australia, and we decided not to, which is brilliant, because we now have a really amazing cultural asset. And I can also share with you that we are actually getting international loan requests for these artworks all the time, which is massively exciting, and also shows that our collection can really play a big role on an international art scene. Moving on, another superstar, I'm very conscious of the time. So another superstar from our collection is Aubrey Williams. He is a Guyanese artist who, very similarly to Nolan, moved to the UK in the 1950s. He was absolutely instrumental in the foundation of the British Caribbean art movement, which is a movement that in the last few years has been really massively rediscovered. There's a lot of research going on, so it's very exciting to be part of this. And just as I joined the University Art Collection, we have loaned two of our Aubrey Williams paintings to Tate Britain to be part of their exhibition Live Between Islands, Caribbean British art from the 1950s to the present day. And again, this was a major show, very transformational in the way, or transformative in the way it looked at interpreting artists of this period and looking at Afro-Caribbean artists in a way that hasn't really been done before. So it's fantastic to have our works part of this new movement. The History of Art department has recently organized a fantastic lecture that focuses on Williams, and I know that there is a lot of research from the department as well going into these works. So keep an eye out. I'm sure there's something very exciting coming out very, very soon, and we are very lucky to have these works. So I've noticed that we've loaned, well, I've mentioned that we've loaned two works to Tate Britain, but we actually have three works in our collection, which again is very unique. Not many collections have that great number of artworks. And I'm also very, very pleased that we are very closely working with the artist's daughter, Mary Dora Williams, who has been an absolute delight to be in touch with, and she has provided us with amazing consultation. And this painting that is real, again, a real jewel in the crown, is called Heraldry at York from 1961, and it was specifically commissioned for York. So this is a fantastic reflection, Aubrey Williams's reflection of life in York. Apparently, he was interested in the Minster, the religious plays the medieval plays that take part in that happen in York every year. And while Williams's traditional work of expressing himself could be described as abstract expressionism, although he didn't like to be labeled in this way. So while the artwork is rather abstract, it is based on his experience of being in York and researching the Minster and having experience with kind of festivities here in our city. Now, to show the downside of what sometimes happens when you have 60 years of an unmanaged art collection, when we discovered this painting prior to the other two being loaned to Tate Britain, we found out that the painting was rather damaged. It wasn't hung in a very suitable space, so there was some damage to the frame, but also it had these mysterious kind of splashes on it. And hopefully you can see on this central slide that there are these kind of darkened, as if something was like poured over the painting. Now, last year when I started working at the collection, we thought, well, we definitely need to have this painting looking as new. We need to have it conserved. This is one of the most valuable artworks on campus. And we consulted with Maridoa Williams, and she said, hang on, my dad was incredibly creative. He experimented with many different methods and techniques. He combined very loose paint with very thick paint. So I'm not sure at all that those marks that you think could be some external damage, whether they are actually damage or not. And so we entered into a dialogue with Maridoa and with the conservators, and we had the conservators do a close-up analysis of whether those splashes are indeed coffee, which was my guess, or whether there was something else, because obviously we wouldn't want to remove anything that was meant to be part of the painting. So we had George Blake come over from London, who collaborates with the October Gallery and works very closely with the Williams's estate, and he did an in-depth analysis of the painting together with our lovely conservators. And you can see on the image on the right, I hope for you it's also the right side of the screen, where that's a microscopic image of where these splashes have been, and the conservators have found that these splashes are on top of the paint, so they have been added much later after the paint has been already dried and somewhat deteriorated, and that they had loads of blonde hair in them as well. So this was quite if anyone wants to write a novel about Aubrey Williams and why there's blonde hair in his coffee stained paintings, I think that would make a really interesting read. So based on this, we have recently taken the decision to have the painting cleaned and to, well, conserved. And we are very much hoping that we will be able to show this phenomenal painting, hopefully in York, as soon as the conservation is finished. And I need to say in here that I'm really grateful for the financial support from the Borthwick Institute of Archives and Research Collections, which is where I work, and which is the institute that oversees the art collection on behalf of the whole university. And I'm really grateful that we could find the financial support from them to make the conservation happen. And here's just a few images of the other Aubrey Williams's work. You can see again these enormously fascinating textures, but also especially on the sun and earth details, you can see that he did experiment with very loose paint. There's a lot of places where you can say, are these coffee splodges, or is this actually paint? So that's why we were so incredibly careful. Now, I'm massively aware of the time, so I will just very quickly show you a few other images. These are works from our collection by artists from the 60s. The 60s is really a kind of modern art from that period, is an incredibly strong feature of our art collection. And I hope in the future, most of these works are actually very heavily under-researched. And I really hope that this collection will give a lot of opportunities to students and academics to dive into the collection and research this work for us. The work of John Langton that you're seeing here as well. John Langton is an incredibly versatile artist. We've got about 17 works in in our collection. Almost each of them is completely different from the other. So here is this is something that I think a monographic exhibition would be due. And John Langton, who is now in his 90s, is very closely linked to the university's history as well, because in 1995 he received his honorary doctorate from the university, and he was the only ever artist fellow of the university, which is something that I think we should definitely bring back. And finally, to wrap up in the last few minutes, I need to sing the praises of History of Art undergrad students from a curating course, which coincidentally is run by Dr. Richard Johns, who is chairing the session. So I'm really, really glad to have this kind of honor to be speaking under his chairmanship, if that's a word. And here you can see John Langton's work being examined by the students, because they actually chose to use the work for their exhibition on campus. And if you are not far from York, I would invite you to come over and see the exhibition. This is actually a second exhibition of this type that we've done together. This one, these images are from last year, an exhibition that was called Concrete Opinions, and celebrated the original aesthetic of the campus and also reflections of student life on campus over the years. So this was our first ever exhibition last year. followed by this year's exhibition, which has just opened a week ago, and it's installed in the lobby of the art history department, curated by second-year students and featuring some amazing artworks from the collection. I couldn't help and had to show this wonderful comparison, which we've also shown during the launch of the event, between one of the paintings, a really large-scale David Pugh Evans painting called Window Holds All the Secrets, which the students have chosen for the exhibition, which is so very on the same vibe, shall we say, as René Magritte's The Human Condition from 1933. And the students have created a wonderful interpretation of these artworks. Rather than telling you what you should be looking at, they are inviting you to actually bring your own stories into the images. And all of the images in the exhibition currently shown are actually images that really defy a clear narrative, defy a clear interpretation. So there's a lot of participation that they require from you. And we're really proud to have on display as well a very colourful image by Anne-Marie Lecan, Caligula's Horse, which normally sits in the philosophy department, but we have brought it over to art history specifically to be part of this exhibition. And Anne-Marie is one of the 55 artists, female artists in our collection, which is again something, a body of work that I think needs so much more further research, and I look forward to holding more exhibitions on campus. There are other displays on campus as well, so just a very quick kind of advertising of things that you can see on campus. Last year, again in collaboration with art history students and students from the Norman Ray Gallery, we have an exhibition in the Humanities Research Centre called We Are York, celebrating local artists of colour, which actually shows 9 paintings that were commissioned specifically from artists of colour living in York and Yorkshire, and which have been inquired into the art collection. So this is another example of the art collection growing and reflecting contemporary times. And we also have a series which will be launching soon called The Art of Politics, which we've done in collaboration with the politics department. And these are all contemporary artworks from international artists, all populating the corridors in Vanbrugh College, Derwent College and Berwick building. There's over 30 artworks, I think, altogether to see, and we will be launching this trail officially later in the summer, so keep an eye out. But already now you can see quite a lot of them on display throughout these locations. And finally, I would like to thank you so much for coming to my talk today and expressing your interest in all the exciting happenstances here at the University of York Art Collection. And please do keep an eye out for invitations to events and exhibitions on our social media. And I very much look forward to seeing you at one of our many upcoming events and exhibitions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Helena, for such a fascinating insight into the collection, some of its highlights and also some of its secrets. We've got a whole bunch of questions coming from the audience, which I'll come to in just a second. Before I do, though, I just wanted to comment. I was interested to hear you talk about the Austin Wright sculpture near the library as the avocado, anecdotally. Years ago, back in the 1990s, I was a student at York. Before avocados became the fashionable food of choice among the English middle classes, I don't think I'd tried an avocado at the time, and we used to refer to it then as the apple core. So it's interesting to hear how the title has changed with the times. Anyway, talking about the sculpture, this sculpture trail has generated quite a few interesting questions. People are keen to know if there are any tours planned coming up, or if Christine Ogden asked, is there a map available that people can use to navigate their own way around the sculpture trail?
Yes, thank you so much for that's a brilliant question. I have to confess, we had 2 tours planned as part of the Festival of Ideas this week, and I unfortunately had to cancel them because I have sprained my ankle in an absolutely awful way and had to cancel the tours. But we will be rescheduling them, so if you have been booked on them, you will get a chance to see. And we will be shortly releasing a schedule of tours that will be taking place over the summer. So again, our social media is the best place to look for any upcoming dates. So there will be definitely at least 4 tours throughout the summer, and these are open to the public, families, anyone. You don't have to have any prior knowledge, so you're most welcome. We usually don't have more than 25 people on a tour, simply because it's can be quite difficult to coordinate if it's over 25 people, but we will be running them throughout not only the summer but it's like an ongoing feature. So we definitely have some available. And as to, what was the second question?
Oh, a map.
Map, yes, we do
Yeah.
have a map because it sits online, and I just have to say that this map is ever so slightly outdated because it's been done in 2015 by, again, wonderful art history students and Norman Ray Gallery team. In the meantime, some sculptures have shifted, so if there are some discrepancies on the map, please don't panic. I am actually planning a big working group consisting mainly of art history students and other students from across the different departments to work with me on a project of revamping the map and actually creating proper signage around the sculptures as well, which will be starting in September. So hopefully next Festival of Ideas, I will be telling you we've got a brand new branding, and you can find the sculptures and signage and map and online presence as well. So bear with me on that one.
Great, thank you. We've got lots of questions, so I'm actually going to try and merge a couple of questions into one to give you the opportunity to address as many as possible. First part comes from an anonymous member of the audience, anonymous attendee, and they ask about, really I think it's a question about what's distinctive about a university art collection, and they ask, do other universities have art collections that you're aware of and that you measure your own collection against or take inspiration from? And just as an extension to that question, Thomas Williams asks, and this is a question about the display of the collection. In Fantasylands, they ask, would you like a dedicated or purpose-built permanent gallery space, or would you rather have a series of peripatetic exhibitions which use different spaces of the university?
Thank you so much. Those are great questions, and I'll start with the last one. So absolutely yes to a purpose-built art gallery, but also I actually like the combination of using spaces around the campus as well. So for example, with the Art of Politics trail, that's a trail that we've created specifically for spaces that are not suitable for art collection items. And one of the biggest, I'll kind of merge the answers together as well. One of the reason why I make a distinction between maybe some contemporary artwork and artwork from the art collection is that we are trying to get the collection to a museum's accreditation standard. So a lot of universities also do have art collections. We are part of the wonderfully prestigious Russell Group University group, and basically all the other Russell Group universities have art collections. They have curatorial teams, and they do have galleries as well where they show their artwork. So I would be delighted if we could follow in their footsteps and have a dedicated gallery space. And the reason would be that artworks like the Sidney Nolans, like the Aubrey Williamses, and other the most valuable work from the collection, we just cannot risk putting them on an ordinary corridor because these works are simply too valuable, both in monetary terms and in art historical value, to be put in places where they are not secured, or where they are, when it's too hot or too bright. So that's the reason why a dedicated gallery would be wonderful, while I'm also keen to keep displaying artwork all over the campus, all over the university, with pocket displays in various places. Obviously, the art history reception area that we've now turned into an impromptu gallery is a fantastic space that really works incredibly well. And not only that, it's a beautiful display space, but it's also alive. So one of the big differences between a museum collection and a university collection is that university collections are much more closely connected to the actual kind of flow of life in the university premises. So a lot of the art collection artworks, and all of, for example, the Brian Cantor's long-term loans, they're all placed in spaces where people come to meet, where people come to have coffee, where people hold meetings. So it's not necessarily that you come into a space that you only go to see artwork. You actually encounter the artwork while you're on your way to someone's office, or while you're set in a meeting, or while you're having a coffee in a lobby of your department, which is a real signature feature and something that I think needs celebrating. And that's why I do want artwork to be spread all over the campus anyway. But having said that, having that dedicated gallery space would allow us to create specifically high-end, high-value artwork displays, and also to have touring exhibitions from international museums and galleries on campus as well, so that our students, for example, could get a hands-on experience with our collection artwork network, but also be there when, you know, a fancy loan from Tate Britain or from the gallery in Ontario is being installed at the university, which would be really great. And just to add to that as well, there are specific networks as well of university museum galleries, and we are very proudly members of many of them. So just a few weeks ago, there was a wonderful conference of the National University Museums Group in Manchester, chaired by the fantastic Esme Ward, who is doing amazing kind of transformative work in the museums world. And so we are now becoming part of this very vibrant networks and working with other universities nationally and internationally as well. Great,
thank you. That's a really interesting answer. I guess you're right. The ideal balance would be to keep a balance between having a high spec dedicated exhibition space while remaining true to the ethos of the university when it was founded, that art is something that is encountered almost by accident every day. Just following on from that, the idea of art being accessible and visible to an everyday part of life on campus. I'm going to, again, try and merge two questions, one from a current student and one from a future student, hopefully. Ooh. Firstly, from Ellie Smales, who is hoping to start studying at York on our curating and art history degree. Yay. In September. Ellie was wondering how you want to make the collection more easily accessible to the public in the future. Do you have plans for making it more visible and inviting maybe people from outside of the university to encounter the collection? And from Ashley, a current history of art student, Ashley asks very generously, how can I get involved in helping with the map next year? Fantastic, that's brilliant. Ashley, yes, wonderful. I'm really, really glad. Drop me a line and I'll get you on the list. And I will be doing a proper call out to all current and future students as well, hopefully, probably by the end of the month, where I will kind of put together a Google form where you can put your name down and we'll create this working group. And then hopefully as semesters kick in September, we will be able to meet together and work on the project together. So that's fantastic. And as to the question of the public engagement, I'm absolutely determined to make the collection more accessible. At the moment, a lot of the public engagement is linked to the sculpture trail because it is easily accessible. That's another reason why I would need a dedicated gallery on campus, because that would be much easier to bring the public into the gallery. At the moment, what I'm doing, for example, with exhibitions that we have on campus already, such as the exhibition Eye of the Beholder, which just opened, is that I promote it very widely among the public as well. I have regular appearances on BBC Radio York, for example, where I always do updates about what exhibitions are on campus, really encouraging the public to come. And mainly through social media, I do regular posts where I encourage people to find the displays. One of the issues is that it's very difficult because art history department is the lobby is you kind of have to know where you're going on campus. So that's one of the issues that we've had, that while I do invite people to come over, sometimes they struggle to find the location. So my plan to tackle that particular problem is that from next year, I would like to add to the sculpture trails tours, I would like to add exhibition tours where I meet everyone at the bus stop and then I take them to where the displays are. So for example, to the art history department, then to the HRC, and then to other places around the campus. So that's the plan. That's the plan so far. And I have this cunning plan that because there's too little of me and too many of these tasks to do, my cunning plan is to work very closely with you guys from the curating course and to kind of give you the opportunity to become trained as a tour in all of these exhibitions, for example, so that it's not just me taking people around, but it can be you if you're interested and get more kind of insight into what we're doing with the art collection. And my kind of passion from the start was not to have the art collection as something that it closed off. This is now mine. I'm playing with these artworks, until I retire. Nobody can kind of disturb me. My idea is completely the opposite. I want to have for students, but also for the public and for anyone interested, to be as involved as possible with the art collection. And while I've only been in place in my role for about a year and a half, not even complete year and a half. So small steps and all that, but I am really determined to
open things up so that people can come and see the collection artworks, they can get involved in projects, and especially for current and future students, that is, you are my kind of target group that I want to get you so involved that when you leave the university, you'll be like, yeah, the one thing I remember is working with the collection. That's my cunning plan. So
yeah, hopefully not the one thing they remember.
No. One of the many amazing things.
Yeah. I mean, there's loads of questions. We could carry on for another half an hour, but I know we're getting close to the end of our time. So lots of questions, people asking how they can find out more about the collection, where they can see it, and so on. Caroline has an interesting question, also maybe a commercial proposition. Can you order prints from the collection? I think I would encourage anyone to, if you don't mind, Helena, people to get in touch with you with any questions directly about the question. But I really want to end with a question from Alice, a question which has to be asked really, which is, what is your favourite piece in the collection and why?
Oh, that's a tricky one. Thank you. That's a really nice question. You know what I'm going to say? I think this is something that kind of changes throughout as I kind of work through the collection and see pieces in real life as opposed to online. And actually, currently, my favorite piece is the David Pugh Evans Window Holds All the Secrets piece, because I was quite charmed by seeing it in real life, and it actually inspired me so much that yesterday I wrote a poem about it, which I haven't done for many years. So it really does have a big impact on me. And seeing it's a really massive, big painting, and just seeing it in all its glory is really fantastic. So I have to say, when it comes to the collection artworks, I'm a bit promiscuous. I do change my kind of artwork crush every few weeks. So there's a lot of them that I'm really, really fond of. But at the moment, that one is probably at the top of my priority. And I've got it here on a poster as well, because the students used it for one of their posters. So I'm kind of living with it everywhere I go.
Great, thank you, Helena. More offers of help for the map. Deb Ward in the communications team at the university is keen to be involved in that as well, so I'll make sure the details are passed. Great, there are more questions, but unfortunately, such a busy program with the Festival of Ideas, we need to wrap up now. So I just want to end by, lots of people have been posting comments saying thank you so much. And I want to add to that by saying thank you, Helena, for such a fascinating talk. And thank you, the audience, for joining us this evening and for your great questions. So thank you all. It's been a great event. See you soon, Helena, and see you all again soon.